The fluorescent lights hummed their usual dead frequency in Polunsky Unit's visitation wing, as though even electricity knew better than to shine too bright this close to death. Marcus, Ghost, Rivera sat motionless in the metal chair, shackled hands resting on the bolted table. Eyes locked on the institutional clock mounted above the reinforced door. 9:47 a.m. In 48 hours, the state of Texas would push poison through his veins. 5 years of appeals had crumbled to dust. 5 years of screaming into the void that he didn't remember, that something was wrong, that he couldn't have, all of it ignored. Boot steps echoed down the corridor, precise, institutional. Captain Morris appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 corrections officers. Behind them, 5 more filed in, taking positions along the cinder block wall. 8 guards for 1 shackled man and his final request. Morris's face was administrative concrete. Rivera. Your request for non-family visitation has been reviewed. Marcus's voice came out raw and used to hoping. Warden. I need to see Rex. My K-9 partner. Before, he couldn't finish the sentence. Something shifted behind Morris's eyes. Not quite compassion. Recognition, maybe. Of what it meant when a man facing death asked for a dog instead of a priest. The animal's handler has been contacted, Morris said, each word measured. Miss Chen is bringing him. 20 minutes. As the captain's boots retreated down the hallway, Marcus closed his eyes and exhaled a breath he'd been holding for 5 years. He didn't know that this one simple request, a dying man wanting to see his dog, would detonate a truth that would force everyone in that prison to confront what they'd been part of. What none of them knew was that Rex wasn't coming to say goodbye. He was coming to give testimony. Leave a like and let us know where you are watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Now let's continue with the story. The Helmand province sun beat down like divine punishment as Marcus moved through the rubble-strewn street, Rex 3 paces ahead, nose working the air in methodical sweeps. August 2016. Their 47th patrol together. Marcus had stopped counting the close calls after 30. Rex's ears went rigid. Marcus's hand shot up, fist closed. The 12 men behind him froze mid-step. Sergeant Hayes, bringing up the rear, didn't need to be told twice. Neither did Corporal Mitchell or Private Dominic. They'd all learned the same lesson: when Rex stopped, you stopped. When Rex's tail went stiff as rebar, you held your breath and prayed. The German shepherd sat. Stared at a point in the road 15 feet ahead where the dust looked like every other square inch of this godforsaken country. But Rex knew. He always knew. IED, Marcus called back, voice barely above a whisper. Mitchell, call it in. Nobody moves. It took the EOD team 40 minutes to reach them. 40 minutes of standing statue still in 115-degree heat while locals watched from windows with expressions that gave away nothing. When the tech finally extracted the device, a pressure plate wired to enough homemade explosive to turn their convoy into pink mist and shrapnel, he whistled low. Your dog just saved a dozen lives, Sergeant. Marcus knelt, let Rex lick his face, scratched behind the ears that had heard death before any human could. Good boy. Good boy, Rex. Colonel Vance's voice crackled over the radio that night. Hell of a find today, Ghost. Drinks on me when we're back at base. Back at the compound, the unit gathered in Vance's quarters, the only space with real air conditioning and bottles that didn't come from the commissary. Hayes poured whiskey into plastic cups while Mitchell counted a stack of bills that seemed thicker than any combat pay Marcus had seen. Another successful delivery, Vance said, raising his cup. To efficient supply chains. They all drank. Marcus too, though something in his gut shifted. He'd stopped asking questions 3 months ago when Hayes had pulled him aside and said some things were need to know, and Marcus didn't need to know. These men were his brothers. They'd bled together. If they said trust the process, he trusted. Rex lay at Marcus's feet, head on his paws, watching them all with eyes that seemed to see everything. 14 months later, Marcus stood in his sister's kitchen in Austin, civilian clothes hanging loose on a frame that had forgotten how to relax. Rex sat beside him, pressed against his leg like he could sense the invisible wounds that didn't show up on VA paperwork. "You're home now," his sister kept saying. "You're safe." But Marcus's hands shook when trucks backfired. His eyes scanned every room for exits. And at night, when the darkness pressed in and the nightmares came in waves, only Rex kept him anchored, the dog steady breathing a rhythm that said, "You're alive. Stay alive. I've got you, asterisk." What Marcus couldn't know was that the brothers he trusted were already 3 steps ahead, building empires on the backs of corpses. And when federal prosecutor Angela Dominguez started asking questions about ghost contracts and missing supply manifests, those same brothers would decide that some bonds were only as strong as their silence. And silence, Marcus would learn, could be bought, or buried. Angela Dominguez arrived at the construction site in a charcoal suit that had no business in the Austin heat, picking her way through lumber and cement dust and heels that clicked against plywood like a countdown. Marcus saw her coming from the 3rd-floor scaffolding and knew immediately she was federal. Something about the way she moved, purpose in every step, eyes that catalogued exits and faces without seeming to look at all. "Marcus Rivera?" She had to shout over the jackhammer 2 floors down. "I'm Angela Dominguez, Assistant U.S. Attorney. I need 20 minutes of your time." They sat in her car with the AC blasting, Marcus still in his work boots and dust-covered jeans, while she spread files across the dashboard. Contract numbers. Supply manifests. Names he recognized: Hayes, Mitchell, Dominic, Vance. "Your unit had an unusual amount of requisition activity during your deployment," she said, pen tapping against a page of highlighted discrepancies. "Supplies ordered, supplies delivered, but the numbers don't match. Millions of dollars in equipment that disappeared into thin air." Marcus stared at the figures. His hands had started shaking again, the tremor that came when memories he tried to bury clawed their way back up. "I cleared routes. Handled wrecks. I didn't deal with supply chain. But you were there." Angela's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "You saw things. I saw my brothers keeping us alive." The words came out harder than he meant them to. "Whatever they did to make that happen, I didn't ask questions." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you. You weren't part of it, you were cover. The decorated K-9 handler, the hero who saved 12 men. Good optics while the real operation ran behind you. The truth of it hit like shrapnel." Marcus closed his eyes, felt the familiar tightening in his chest that meant a panic attack was circling. "Mr. Rivera, I'm not here to jam you up. I'm here to stop people who are still doing this. Still stealing. Still getting soldiers killed with faulty equipment while they pocket the difference." She gathered her files. "If you remember anything, anything at all, call me." As she put the car in drive, she glanced at him. "By the way, I'm training a dog. German Shepherd, actually. For protection. You ever work with them, you know they're smarter than most people give them credit for. They remember things we forget." Marcus thought nothing of it. Just small talk from a prosecutor trying to connect. 3 weeks later, Angela Dominguez was found in her apartment, beaten to death with a violence that spoke of rage, of personal vendetta, of someone who'd lost control. Her face was unrecognizable. Her files were scattered across blood-soaked carpet. And on her coffee table, investigators found a photograph, Marcus Rivera in full combat gear, Rex at his side, both of them staring at the camera like warriors who'd seen too much. When the police came for Marcus, he was 3 beers deep, the blackouts getting worse, the nightmares bleeding into waking hours. He didn't remember where he'd been that night. Didn't remember driving. Didn't remember anything except waking up with scraped knuckles and a sense of dread so heavy he could barely breathe. Marcus Rivera, you're under arrest for the murder of Angela Dominguez. The handcuffs closed around his wrists like a door slamming shut on everything he'd ever been. And somewhere across town, in a kennel Marcus didn't know existed, Rex lifted his head and whined, sensing something wrong in a world that had already gone dark. The courtroom smelled like old wood and newer desperation. Marcus sat at the defense table in a suit his sister had bought from Goodwill, watching his public defender, a kid named Sullivan who looked barely old enough to drink, fumble through files with hands that trembled every time the prosecutor stood up. Assistant District Attorney Chin moved like a predator who'd already tasted blood. Your fingerprints were found on the victim's door frame, Mr. Rivera. On her kitchen counter. On the bedroom doorway where she tried to flee. Marcus stared at his own hands. Calloused. Scarred. Capable of terrible things, he'd killed in Hellmend, watched men die, pulled triggers without hesitation when the situation demanded. But Angela? He couldn't see it. Couldn't remember it. I don't know, he'd told Sullivan during prep. I was drinking that night. I don't remember going there. Sullivan had closed his eyes like a man receiving a terminal diagnosis. That's not a defense, Marcus. That's a confession. The prosecution built their case like a wall, brick by brick. A neighbor testified she'd seen Marcus sitting in his truck outside Angela's apartment building at 9:47 p.m. The bartender from Lucky's Tavern confirmed Marcus had been there earlier, drinking hard, muttering about people who don't understand loyalty. Angela's assistant took the stand and described how the prosecutor had mentioned Marcus Rivera's name the day before her death, said she was going to push him harder, that he was protecting someone. Motive, means, opportunity, Chen said, pacing before the jury box. A decorated soldier suffering from severe PTSD, drinking heavily, facing exposure for what he knew about his unit's criminal activities. Ms. Dominguez was getting too close. So he silenced her the only way he knew how, with violence. Sullivan's cross-examinations were toothpick jabs against armor plating. When he tried to suggest alternative suspects, Hayes, Mitchell, Dominic, Vance, Chen produced alibis for each. When he mentioned the gaps in Marcus's memory, she brought in a psychiatrist who testified that alcoholic blackouts don't prevent violent action, they just prevent recollection. Your Honor, the defense would like to note that my client has no history of violence against civilians. Objection. The defendant is trained in lethal force and has killed multiple enemy combatants. Sustained. Marcus watched it happen like he was outside his body, floating somewhere near the ceiling, observing his own destruction. During the lunch recess on day 4, he vomited in the courthouse bathroom while Sullivan stood outside the stall, apologizing in a voice that cracked. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they filed back in, not one of them looked at Marcus, the universal tell of condemnation. On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. The word landed like a bullet to the spine. Marcus felt nothing. No rage, no fear, no relief. Just a vast emptiness where his life used to be. The judge's voice seemed to come from underwater as she delivered the sentence, death by lethal injection, date to be determined. His sister sobbed in the gallery. Sullivan gathered his inadequate files with shaking hands. And Marcus sat perfectly still, a warrior trained to take incoming fire without flinching, wondering if somewhere in the blackness of his mind he'd actually done it. If the monster the jury saw was the truth of what he'd become. In a kennel across the city, Rex paced his run and wouldn't eat, wouldn't settle, sensing something fundamentally wrong in the world. His handler gone, disappeared, the bond between them severed by walls and wire and a system that didn't care what dogs knew. Time moved differently in the Polunsky unit. Days bled into months, months into years, until Marcus could barely remember what the sun felt like on skin that wasn't behind reinforced glass. 5 years in a 6x10 concrete box. 5 years of 23-hour lockdown. 5 years of watching men take their last walk down the corridor while guards spoke in hushed voices that echoed off cinder block. He'd written 47 letters to Rex's handler. 47 requests to know if his dog was alive, healthy, remembered him. The first year, he'd been polite. Professional. By year 3, the letters were desperate, raw pleas from a man watching his sanity slip through his fingers. None of them received replies. Father Tom arrived during year 2, a prison chaplain with kind eyes and a conviction that every soul deserved witness. He started visiting Marcus on Thursdays, bringing contraband in the form of hope. "Tell me about Afghanistan," Father Tom said during one visit, settling into the plastic chair outside Marcus's cell. So Marcus talked. About Rex. About the heat and the dust and the brothers who'd kept him alive. And somewhere in the talking, something surfaced, a detail that had been nagging at him like a splinter working its way to the surface. "The blackout that night," Marcus said slowly, staring at his hands through the slot in the door. "It wasn't like the other times. When I drank too much, things got fuzzy. Blurred. But I could usually piece together fragments. That night? Nothing. Like someone took scissors to my memory and cut it clean out." Father Tom leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I don't know what I'm saying. Just that something was wrong. Something more than whiskey. But there was no one to tell. No appeals left. No lawyer willing to touch a case this cold, this closed. So Marcus existed in his box and tried not to think about the execution date that would eventually come. Outside the prison walls, the world kept turning. Sergeant Hayes died first, car accident on I-35, lost control at high speed, burned to death before paramedics arrived. The news mentioned it briefly. Decorated veteran. Tragedy. Moving on. Corporal Mitchell was next. Drowned in Lady Bird Lake during a kayaking trip. Blood alcohol level twice the legal limit. Another veteran who couldn't handle civilian life. Another cautionary tale. Private Dominic lasted the longest. Overdose in a Motel 6, off Highway 183. Fentanyl-laced heroin. The needle still in his arm when housekeeping found him. The obituary mentioned his service, his struggles, his demons. Marcus learned about them in fragments, newspaper clippings Father Tom brought, casual mentions during rare phone calls with his sister. Each death landed like a punch to the gut. His brothers. His unit. All gone. "They're dropping like flies," Marcus told Father Tom during a Thursday visit in year 4. "Doesn't that seem strange to you?" The chaplain's expression shifted. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying, 3 men from the same unit, all dead within 5 years, all after Angela started investigating." Marcus pressed his forehead against the cool metal of the door. "Maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe that's what this place does." Father Tom made notes in a small journal he always carried. Said nothing. But his eyes held something Marcus hadn't seen in years, doubt. The good kind. The kind that asked questions instead of accepting convenient answers. In a quiet suburb of Austin, Detective Sarah Chen, Angela Dominguez's former partner, sat in her home office surrounded by files she wasn't supposed to still have. Files about a case that had never felt right. Files about a convicted killer who'd looked her in the eyes during interrogation and seemed genuinely lost. She'd watched the obituaries too. Hayes, Mitchell, Dominic. All dead. All from the same unit Angela had been investigating. Sarah opened her laptop and typed a name she hadn't searched in months, Marcus Rivera. Current location, Polunsky Unit. Death row. Execution date, pending. Then she pulled up another file. The one about a German shepherd named Rex. The one Angela had been training for something she'd never explained before she died. Outside Marcus's cell, fluorescent lights buzzed their eternal hymn. Another day ending. Another day closer to the needle. But somewhere in the darkness, pieces were moving. Connections forming. Truth stirring like something buried that refused to stay dead. The notification came on a Tuesday. Execution date set, March 15, 9 a.m. 48 hours from now, Marcus would cease to exist. Warden Phillips appeared at his cell that afternoon with the standard paperwork. Final meal request. Witness list. Last words. And at the bottom, one line that most men left blank, final visitation request. Marcus's hand didn't shake as he wrote the name. Not his sister, who'd stopped visiting after year 3 because watching him die slowly was worse than losing him quickly. Not Father Tom, who would be there anyway as spiritual advisor. Just 3 letters and a number. Asterisk Rex. K9 hashtag 4187 asterisk. Phillips read it twice. Your dog. My partner. Marcus's voice came out steady. That's all I want. Just Rex. The warden could have denied it. Should have, probably. But something in the request, its simplicity, its strangeness, made him pause. I'll see what I can do. The story leaked within hours. By Wednesday morning, it was everywhere. Condemned killer's dying wish, one last visit with his dog, the media loved it. Human interest with a dark edge. The networks ran split screens, Marcus in his booking photo, Rex in his military K9 vest. Social media exploded. Petitions formed. Public pressure mounted like a wave. The prison had no choice but to grant it. Detective Sarah Chen saw the headline while drinking morning coffee at her kitchen table. She'd been on stress leave for 3 weeks now, ever since the panic attack started. Ever since she'd realized she'd helped send a man to death row for a murder that felt wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. But the dog. Angela had mentioned a dog. A German shepherd she was training for, specialized detection work. Sarah had assumed it was for personal protection, given the threats Angela received. But what if? She grabbed her phone, dialed a number she'd called 100 times during the original investigation. Father Tom. It's Detective Chen. I need to talk about Marcus Rivera. Father Tom had been waiting for this call for 3 years. By Thursday morning, they'd arranged everything. Sarah pulled strings with the department. Father Tom called in favors with the prison chaplain network. The warden, already under media scrutiny, agreed to bend protocol. The visit would happen today. Final visitation, 12 hours before execution. Marcus was brought to the visitation room in full restraints, waist chains, ankle shackles, wrists locked to a belt at his stomach. 5 correctional officers lined the wall behind him, standard protocol for death row inmates in their final hours. The room was sterile, gray, built for goodbyes that wouldn't get messy. Captain Morris stood by the reinforced door. Animal will be brought in shortly. You have 30 minutes. No physical contact permitted. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. His heart hammered against his ribs, the first thing he'd felt in months besides the hollow numbness of waiting to die. Then he heard it. The click of claws on linoleum. The jingle of a collar. Sounds that transported him instantly back to Hellman, to dusty roads and brotherhood, to a time when he'd known who he was. The door opened. Rex walked in on lead, held by a handler Marcus didn't recognize. But the dog was older, graying heavy around the muzzle and eyes, moving with the careful stiffness of arthritis. But those eyes. Still sharp. Still intelligent. Still Rex. Their gazes locked. Something passed between them that had no words. Recognition. Grief. Love that 5 years in concrete walls couldn't kill. Then Rex did something that made every guard in the room tense. He pulled toward Marcus, nose working the air. Circled once. Twice. Sat directly in front of Marcus with rigid posture. Stared at a point on Marcus's chest. Then looked up at his handler and back to Marcus, repeating the sequence. Alert behavior. Detection protocol. Marcus's breath caught. Rex, what? The dog did it again. Circle. Sit. Stare. Alert. The exact sequence he'd performed hundreds of times in Afghanistan when he'd found explosives. But there was nothing here. Just a man in chains and a room full of guards. Father Tom, watching from the observation window with Sarah Chen, felt ice run down his spine. Sarah's hand covered her mouth. Oh my God. What? Father Tom whispered. What is he doing? He's alerting. Sarah's voice shook. Angela trained him. She must have trained him to detect. Detect what? Sarah turned to face him, her eyes wide with terrible understanding. Scopolamine. Rex wouldn't stop. Even as his handler tugged the lead, trying to pull him back, the German shepherd repeated the sequence with mechanical precision. Circle. Sit. Alert. His nose pointed at Marcus's torso like a compass finding true north. No tail wagging. No affection. Pure work mode, the behavior drilled into him through thousands of repetitions until it became instinct. What's wrong with him? Captain Morris stepped forward, hand moving instinctively toward his pepper spray. Is the animal aggressive? No, sir. The handler, a young woman named Torres from the Austin K-9 unit, sounded confused. He's alerting. But that doesn't make sense. Rex was trained for explosive detection, not. I don't know what he's detecting. Marcus stared down at his dog, understanding and confusion warring in his chest. Rex, buddy, I'm right here. It's me. But Rex didn't break protocol. Didn't come in for affection or recognition. He sat rigid, eyes locked on Marcus, waiting for his handler to acknowledge the alert. Waiting for permission to search. The behavior was so ingrained, so automatic, that 5 years of separation couldn't erase it. Time's up, Morris said, gesturing to the guards. Get the dog out. Rivera back to holding. Wait, Marcus lunged forward as far as his chains allowed, the metal biting into his wrists. Please, just let me touch him. Just once. No physical contact. Those are the rules. Morris's face softened for just a moment. I'm sorry, Rivera. I really am. They dragged Rex toward the door, the dog's claws scrabbling against linoleum, still trying to complete the alert sequence. Still working. Still trying to tell them something no human could understand. Marcus was hauled back to his cell in silence, but his mind was screaming. Rex had found something. After 5 years, after everything, his partner had found something. In the observation room, Father Tom grabbed Sarah Chen's arm. Did you see that? I saw a confused dog, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Her detective instincts were firing like neurons in a storm. Or maybe Angela mentioned something once. Father Tom was already pulling out his phone, scrolling through old notes. During confession, not that I can reveal details, but she talked about training a dog for chemical detection. Said it was insurance. In case something happened to her. Sarah's pulse quickened. What kind of chemical? She called it devil's breath. Some drug that makes people forget. Makes them suggestible. Father Tom found the note, showed her the screen. A single word in Angela's handwriting, scopolamine. We need to talk, Sarah said. Not here. 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a booth at Magnolia Cafe, the late-night diner crowd providing cover in white noise and clinking dishes. Sarah had brought her laptop, pulled up files she wasn't supposed to have anymore. Scopolamine, she read from a DEA briefing document. Also known as hyoscine or devil's breath. Derived from nightshade plants. Blocks neurotransmitters in the brain, causing amnesia and extreme suggestibility. Victims become compliant, zombie-like. They'll follow commands, commit acts they'd never normally do, and have zero recollection afterward. It's been used in Colombia for robberies, sexual assaults, even murders. Father Tom's coffee sat untouched, going cold. You're saying someone could have drugged Marcus, made him kill Angela, and he'd never remember doing it? More than that. Sarah pulled up another file, toxicology reports from Marcus's arrest. Look at this. His blood worked the night of the murder. The hospital ran a basic tox screen, alcohol, common drugs. All negative except for elevated BAC. But scopolamine wouldn't show up on a standard panel. You'd have to specifically test for it. And why would they? They had their killer. But if Rex was trained to detect it. Father Tom's hands shook as understanding crashed over him. And he's alerting on Marcus now, 5 years later. Scopolamine can leave trace markers in hair, in tissue, for years after exposure. Sarah's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Father, if someone dosed Marcus that night, traces could still be detectable. Rex could be alerting on residual markers. They sat in silence, the implications spreading like cracks in ice. Marcus has 12 hours, Father Tom finally said. What do we do? Sarah closed her laptop, her jaw set with the determination that had made her Angela's partner. We prove he was drugged. We find who did it. And we stop an innocent man from dying. In 12 hours. In 12 hours. Sarah stood, throwing bills on the table. Call everyone you know. I'll call everyone I know. We're about to tear this case apart. Outside, dawn was still hours away. But somewhere in the darkness, truth was waking up. Sarah spread the files across her dining room table like a coroner laying out evidence of murder. 3 obituaries. 3 men from Marcus's unit. 3 deaths ruled accidental or self-inflicted within 6 months of Angela contacting them for interviews. Hayes died 2 weeks after Angela brought him in for questioning, she said, tracing the timeline with her finger. Father Tom stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. Car accident. Mitchell drowned 3 weeks later. Dominic overdosed a month after that. Coincidence? Father Tom's voice held no conviction. I stopped believing in coincidence when I became a detective. Sarah pulled up her laptop, accessed Angela's case files through a backdoor login she technically didn't have anymore. Angela documented every interview. Look at her notes on Hayes. The screen showed Angela's tight, precise handwriting, asterisk subject extremely nervous. Kept asking if conversation was recorded. Mentioned chemical insurance being used on problems. Refused to elaborate. Left interview sweating profusely despite a C**. Chemical insurance, Father Tom repeated. Scopolamine. Sarah nodded, scrolling deeper. Then she found it, a separate folder labeled K9 Protocol. Inside, emails between Angela and a military K9 trainer named Captain Jessica Rains. Captain Rains, I need Rex cross-trained for scopolamine detection. I believe someone in Rivera's unit is using it as a weapon. Marcus may be the next target. This is life or death. How soon can we start? The response, Ms. Dominguez, I can have Rex trained in 4 weeks. He's already brilliant at detection work. But if what you're suggesting is true, you need protection now, Angela's reply, Rex is my protection. And Marcus's, if I'm right. Please proceed immediately, The final email was dated 3 days before Angela's murder. Father Tom sank into a chair. She knew. She was trying to save him. And someone killed her for it. Sarah's jaw clenched. We need proof. Hard evidence. Something that will stop the execution. She checked her watch. 4:47 a.m. Marcus had 7 hours. Sarah grabbed her phone, dialed a number she swore she'd never call again. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Dr. Martinez? It's Detective Chen. I need you to tell me the truth about Marcus Rivera's toxicology report. Silence. Then, I can't talk about this. Dr. Martinez, they're executing him in 7 hours. If there's something, anything, in that report that was suppressed, now is the time. More silence. Sarah could hear breathing, heavy and conflicted. There were trace amounts, Dr. Martinez finally whispered. Scopolamine. In his blood work from the night of the murder. Not enough to prove conclusively, but enough to raise questions. Sarah's heart hammered. Why wasn't this presented at trial? The prosecutor, Chen, said it was irrelevant. Said it could have been from a dozen sources and would only confuse the jury. She told me if I included it in my official report, she'd make sure I lost my position. A bitter laugh. I have student loans. A mortgage. I told myself one ambiguous result wouldn't change anything. The evidence was overwhelming anyway. You helped convict an innocent man. I helped close a case. His voice cracked. God help me, I knew it was wrong. I've known for 5 years. Sarah hung up and immediately called her former captain. Voicemail. She tried the DA's office. Voicemail. Every official channel was closed at 5 a.m., and by the time they opened, Marcus would have 2 hours left. We need more, Father Tom said. We need whoever orchestrated this. Sarah pulled up Angela's investigation files, following the money trail she'd documented. Ghost contracts. Phantom deliveries. Millions in defense funds disappearing into shell companies. And at the center of it all, Colonel Marcus Vance. She ran his name through current databases. Her blood went cold. He's not a colonel anymore. She turned the laptop toward Father Tom. He's a 2-star general. Head of Defense Logistics Procurement. He oversees contracts worth $8 billion annually. The puzzle pieces slammed together with terrible clarity. Vance had built an empire on theft and murder. Hayes, Mitchell, and Dominic had been his accomplices, and then his liabilities when Angela started investigating. Scopolamine made their deaths look like accidents, suicides, natural causes. Clean. Untraceable. But Marcus was different. Too visible, too decorated, too connected to the story. So Vance had made him the monster instead. Drugged him, used him to kill Angela, then let the evidence do the rest. We need to get this to the governor, Father Tom said. Now. Sarah was already dialing, already moving. But in the back of her mind, a clock ticked down. 7 hours. 6 hours and 59 minutes. Time bleeding away like water through desperate fingers. In his cell, Marcus lay on the steel bunk and stared at the ceiling. Rex had found something. After all these years, his partner had found something. Marcus didn't know what. Didn't know if it mattered. But for the first time since the verdict, he felt something besides numbness. He felt hope. And hope, he'd learned in Afghanistan, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Sarah's phone showed 9:47 a.m. 24 hours until Marcus Rivera's execution. She sat in her car outside Sullivan's law office, engine running, files spread across the passenger seat like weapons she didn't know how to use. Sullivan answered on the first ring. Detective Chin. I haven't heard from you in. File an emergency appeal. Now. I have evidence Marcus was drugged the night of the murder. Silence. Then, what kind of evidence? The kind that proves he was set up. Scopolamine in his blood work that was suppressed. A conspiracy involving a 2-star general. Angela Dominguez's investigation notes that document everything. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands shook on the steering wheel. How fast can you file? For death row. I can have emergency motions filed within 2 hours. But detective, I need actual evidence. Proof. The appeals court won't grant a stay based on theories. Then I'll get you proof. Sarah hung up and stared at the address written on her notepad. Angela's storage unit. The one Sarah had kept paying for 5 years because she couldn't let go, couldn't accept that her partner's murder was solved and closed. The facility was in South Austin, a maze of orange doors and combination locks. Unit 247. Sarah's hands trembled as she spun the dial, Angela's birthday, the code she'd set up before she died. Inside, boxes. Files. Angela's methodical documentation of everything she'd ever investigated. Sarah tore through them, searching for the case files on Vance's unit, knowing she had hours, not days. Then she saw it. A laptop case tucked behind a box of trial transcripts. Sarah pulled it out, opened it. The computer was old but charged, Angela must have kept it plugged in. The screen blazed to life. Password required. Sarah tried Angela's birthday. Failed. Her badge number. Failed. 3 attempts left before lockout. Think. Angela was careful, paranoid even. She'd want someone to find this, but only someone who understood. Someone who knew the case. Sarah typed, Rex. Failed. Her heart hammered. 2 attempts left. Then she remembered. Military K9s had ID numbers. She pulled up the email chain with Captain Rains, found it in Angela's notes, K9 hashtag 4187. Sarah typed, 4187. The screen unlocked. Folders upon folders. Contracts. Bank records. Transcripts. And one labeled scopolamine protocol. Sarah opened it, her breath catching as she read. Angela had documented everything. How Vance had discovered scopolamine during a deployment to Colombia. How he'd weaponized it, using it on soldiers to stage suicides when they became liabilities, using it to make targets compliant during accidents. Hayes, Mitchell, Dominic, all drugged before their deaths. All eliminated because they knew too much about the ghost contracts funneling millions into Vance's offshore accounts. And Marcus. Angela's notes were chillingly precise, *Vance will target Rivera next. MR is the only one clean enough to be credible if he talks. Vance will dose him with scopolamine, use him to eliminate me, then let the evidence convict him. It's perfect, damaged veteran, PTSD, blackouts. No one will question it, asterisk. She'd seen it coming. Had tried to stop it. Had trained Rex as insurance. Sarah's phone rang. Sullivan. I filed the appeals. Now we wait. We don't have time to wait. Sarah was already copying files to a flash drive, her movements frantic. I'm sending you everything. Angela's notes, financial records, the scopolamine protocol. Everything. She hit send on the email, then grabbed her phone to call the governor's office. Busy. She tried the attorney general. Voicemail. The DA. Voicemail. Then her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. Detective Chen. The voice was smooth, military precise. This is General Marcus Vance. I understand you've been making inquiries about my former unit. Sarah's blood turned to ice. How did you get this number? I have resources you can't imagine. I also have friends in the governor's office, the appeals court, the state police. Whatever you think you found, I promise you it won't matter. His voice hardened. Marcus Rivera killed a federal prosecutor in a fit of PTSD-driven rage. Justice will be served tomorrow morning. I suggest you accept that and move on with your career. You drugged him. You used him to kill Angela because she was going to expose you. A pause. Then a low chuckle. Prove it, detective. You have 24 hours. The clock is ticking. He hung up. Sarah sat in the storage unit, surrounded by evidence that should save a man's life, and felt the weight of an entire system arrayed against her. Vance had spent 5 years building walls. He had power, connections, the full force of military and political machinery. All she had was the truth. She grabbed the files and ran. At 3 a.m., they moved Marcus to the holding cell adjacent to the execution chamber. The room was smaller than his regular cell, painted institutional beige, with a steel bed and a clock that seemed to tick louder than any he'd heard before. 6 hours. 360 minutes. 21,600 seconds until the state of Texas would stop his heart. A guard brought the last meal Marcus had requested, his sister's chicken enchiladas, the ones she used to make before he deployed. The ones that tasted like home. He stared at the styrofoam container, lifted the lid, and felt his stomach turn. He couldn't eat. Couldn't even pretend. Instead, he asked for paper and a pen. Dear Rex. Asterisk, I don't know if dogs understand letters, but I need to say this anyway. You were the best partner I ever had. You saved my life more times than I could count, in Helmand, and again 5 years later when you tried to tell them something they couldn't hear. I'm sorry I couldn't save yours back. I'm sorry for everything that happened after we came home, asterisk. Asterisk, you did your job. You always did your job. That's more than most humans can say, asterisk. Asterisk, I hope whoever has you now treats you right. I hope you get to rest. You've earned it, asterisk. Asterisk, thank you for trying. Thank you for remembering, asterisk. Ghost. 70 miles away, Sarah Chen's car screamed through Austin streets with Father Tom in the passenger seat, both of them running on adrenaline and desperation and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The flash drive with Angela's files sat in Sarah's pocket like a live grenade. Call them again, Sarah said, weaving through early morning traffic. Father Tom dialed the governor's office for the 6th time. This time, someone answered. Governor's residence. This is Father Tom Gallagher, prison chaplain at Polunsky Unit. I'm with Detective Sarah Chen of Austin PD. We have evidence of a wrongful conviction in the Marcus Rivera case. His execution is scheduled for 9 a.m. We need to speak with the governor immediately. The governor doesn't take calls at 3 a.m. Then wake him up. Father Tom's voice cracked. We have proof an innocent man is about to die. Silence. Then, come to the mansion. You have 30 minutes. They arrived with 28 minutes to spare, Sarah's credentials getting them through security. The governor's legal team, 3 lawyers who looked like they'd been dragged from bed, waited in a conference room. Sarah slammed the flash drive on the table. Angela Dominguez documented everything. General Marcus Vance used scopolamine to turn soldiers into weapons. He drugged Marcus Rivera and forced him to kill her. This is murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The lead attorney, a woman named Patricia Hernandez, plugged in the drive. Her expression shifted as she read. From skepticism to shock to horror. These are serious allegations against a 2-star general. These are facts, Sarah shot back. Check the financial records. Trace the deaths. Marcus Rivera's toxicology showed scopolamine that was suppressed. Every piece fits. We need to verify. There's no time. Father Tom slammed his hand on the table. Marcus dies in 5 hours. At 7:30 a.m., Marcus was led from the holding cell. Marcus turned his head toward the one-way glass. Somewhere beyond it, officials waited. Media. People who would never believe him. But he spoke anyway. Rex knew, Marcus said clearly. The dog always knows. The executioner moved to his side, prepared the 4-port in his left arm. Marcus closed his eyes. Thought of Afghanistan. Of dust and heat and a German shepherd who'd loved him unconditionally. Thought of Angela, who died trying to save him. Thought of the truth that would die with him. The warden raised his hand to signal the start. Then, a phone rang. Sharp. Shrill. Cutting through the silence like a blade. Phillips grabbed it, listened. His face went pale. Stop. Stop everything. The executioner froze, needle inches from Marcus's arm. We have a stay, Phillips said, voice shaking. Emergency order from the governor. Execution postponed pending investigation. Time seemed to stop. Then restart. Marcus sucked in a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Within hours, the machinery of justice reversed course with the same brutal efficiency it had used to convict him. Angela's files went public. General Vance was arrested at his home in Virginia, dragged out in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. DNA evidence from under Angela's fingernails, evidence that had been insufficient for testing 5 years ago, was retested with new technology. It matched Marcus Vance. He'd been there. Had drugged Marcus, used him as a weapon, then disappeared while Marcus took the fall. 3 weeks later, Marcus walked out of Polunsky unit a free man. Sarah Chin waited by her car, and beside her. Rex. The German shepherd was old now, gray and arthritic and moving slow. But when he saw Marcus, his tail wagged. Not the alert behavior. Not the working dog protocol. Just joy. Marcus dropped to his knees and Rex came to him, and they held each other while cameras flashed and the world watched a reunion 5 years overdue. Good boy, Marcus whispered into Rex's fur. Good boy. You saved me again. The dog always knows.